Welcome to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger, where we help you bridge the gap between pain and performance. Each week, we'll share strategies, insights, and real-life applications to help you keep moving and stay driven. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Movement Driven Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movement Driven Podcast. I'm Dara here with Dr. Greg. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dara?
Doing good. It's so crazy how I feel like we literally just started this podcast and we're like, episode 40 was last week. This is 41.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's just going by. Sooner or later, we're going to like hit the year mark, and it's just been such a fun journey.
That's coming up, I guess.
Yeah, I think November. So we still obviously have 11 weeks.
But still, that's right around the corner.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for almost 10 months. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I think today we're going to continue kind of like why this is still happening, why that is still happening, that kind of conversation, because I feel like, especially this time of year, people want to take off PT because they're traveling and they just, or whether it's PT or just general workouts, or maybe they're not stretching as much because they just want to get the workout over because it's so hot.
Or they're not going to start PT because I'll take care of that after my 3 mini vacations that I have planned.
Exactly. So kind of talking about like the truth about tight muscles and why like stretching it might actually be making it worse. So here's a question I feel like maybe almost every active person would answer kind of the same way. Like, what do you do when a muscle feels tight, and why is that answer often so incomplete?
It's a loaded question from my standpoint.
Ask loaded questions, Greg. You should know that.
So like we have to find out why the muscle is tight, first of all. I think a lot of the time people don't like they come to me and they're just like, oh, I tried these stretches, as if stretches is all that we do from a therapy standpoint. It seems to be a very common thought process amongst a lot of people that I see. So obviously there's a reason for that, but like, they think stretching is the answer to low back pain. Stretching is the answer to this and that. And it can be definitely part of the answer, but it seldom is the main thing that I think about as the thing to go to. I think a lot of the time people are stretching because they feel tight, but they aren't necessarily tight, which we'll get into a little bit. But then it's like, are you stretching a muscle that's just in a protective state? And stretching it is only going to give you temporary relief at best. Or are you stretching a muscle that's in a protective state because it's trying to stabilize a joint nearby that has an injury, like a ligament or a tendon injury, and so this muscle is in protective mode, and then by stretching it, are you theoretically in the short term putting that joint at risk? Because right now in the short term of your injury, that muscle is doing what it needs to be doing to stabilize and guard.
Right.
In long-term chronic pain, that tends to be something that's very problematic, and we want to target that immediately. But that's where we have to delve into how long have you had this, what's going on, and why are you tight? Is it short adaptive changes of the structure, or is it a protective state that you're in?
Yeah, so I think you've said before that some of the like tightest patients, or the ones that are complaining about tightness and a lot, or the ones that we see that are doing that, they're always calling it, oh, they're doing a bunch of stretching and it's not working. Or some of like, they're the most dedicated stretchers, but like they're still super tight. So is that kind of the similar thing, or is there more, like what's going on?
Well, I think there's still, even in that, there's 2 kind of people that pop into my head, 2 patient archetypes, if we will. So a lot of people that stretch, well, let's just put them all into the category of, hey, I'm stretching and I'm not having success. Or I'm stretching and I'm not getting better. Well, okay, first of all, like we said before, who told you stretching is what you should be doing? Maybe it's part of it. Maybe it's not what you should be doing. And that kind of then gets further divided into 2 people. So to your point, some of the people that are stuck in that spastic protective mode, they'll stretch until they're blue in the face. But if that underlying reason of, like the reason why that muscle is per se tight in the first place, quote unquote, is because it's guarding or it's weak. So it's trying to do something that it doesn't necessarily have the capability of doing, and it starts to just go into a state of what I call semi-spasm, or the semi-spastic state where you can't relax it and you can't by stretching it, and you can't contract it well. So it's kind of useless for you, and it's probably a pain generator of yours. So those people are stretching and stretching and stretching, but because there's an underlying weakness, it still reverts back into the semi-spastic state to do what you're asking it to do, whether it's just walking prolonged distances or a sport or just taking care of the kids, whatever it is. This muscle is overworked because it's weak. So then it gets into this spastic tight feeling. And then the other side of that is a lot of people that are on the other side of that spectrum of like, they're hypermobile patients where they have a lot of mobility. They tend to feel tight because they're unstable. And so they feel like when they stretch, they feel comfortable because they're reaching an end range of their joints. So they're finding stability, because when they're in their middle range, that lack of stability is a frustrating feeling, I think, for them. Mm-hmm. And so they search for comfort by stretching, but they're the people that shouldn't be stretching really much at all from a, hey, you're already hypermobile, meaning you have too much mobility theoretically. We need to stabilize so you feel more stable in your mid-range rather than always searching for stability at the end ranges by stretching more.
Right.
So I think stretching just for the sake of stretching is really never a good thing. It has to be accompanied by strength. And to balance the system, really.
Yeah. So, okay. So you said there's two different kinds of muscle tightness. So why does it matter, like, how you treat those different tightnesses?
Yeah. So I think, for instance, like if somebody has really poor posture of their upper body, right? So think of those people that kind of, yes, we all sit up. Everybody listening in their car right now, they just sat up taller. When we have the rounded shoulders forward, our pecs can get really tight. So sometimes I see people with neck pain and shoulder pain, they have an adaptation where they have a shortened tissue, okay? So the tissue is now shortened, it's tight, it needs actual lengthening over time to be able to get your shoulder blade in the right position, quote unquote good posture, or access it when we're doing rowing type exercise, pulling type movement patterns. So that's a structural shortening, tightening of a muscle. We need to lengthen it. Versus if I have tight hamstrings, what's the reason for that? Is it structurally tight, or are they trying to stabilize my pelvis because I have poor lumbopelvic control, i.e. poor core and glute control, and my hamstrings that do attach to the bottom side of my pelvis are trying to do too much, so I stretch, and they're still trying to rebound. In that case, I need to strengthen them so they have more capacity to do what I need them to do, or strengthen the other part of that system, the core and the glutes, to do their job so the hamstring is more free to do what it's made to do. Versus if I'm just stretching that till I'm blue in the face, it's only going to be temporary relief, temporary lengthening. You could probably make the argument as I'm sitting here talking in the way that I treat. I would argue that once there's tightening, now there's effective weakness that's occurring too. So chicken or the egg, yeah. Whether it was a postural deficit that made you tight, well, now that muscle is inherently weak. We've talked several times in different episodes about the rubber band analogy. If I want to shoot it far, I need to stretch it, and to create power in the opposite direction. So now that back to that chest example, if I'm shortened, now I try to use it. Well, there's nowhere for me to stretch it to gain that reflexive counter to that movement and create power and create force. Yeah. So tight is weak is tight. Doesn't really matter. Once we're there, we need to do both. Yeah. So like I said before, you can kind of think of it as a neurological protective spasm. That's more in the acute stage. But once we're in that chronic stage, whether it's shortened because it was weak or it's weak because it got short first, like I said, it doesn't matter at this point. We got to address both. Right. We have to attack both. Yeah. So that I would say you kind of break it into acute versus chronic, or neurological and protective versus adaptive and structurally changed over time.
Yeah. So when the nervous system is holding a muscle tight as a protective response, just mentioned, what is it actually protecting? I know you mentioned before how the muscle could potentially be protecting a ligament. Is it just the ligament, or what else is going on in there?
I think just when there's the sense of pain in the area, the nervous system is you're in your fight or flight mode, right? So if you have, just to bring it to you more personally, when you have knee pain, there's certain muscles that kind of historically turn off for whatever reason. Like the quad is very infamous for like shutting down. Yeah. And then there's other muscles like the hamstring and and the calf, which will get really tight and achy, and they start to like guard and try to protect, and then they're doing too much, and just the system's out of balance, right? And that's what I always say. I think sometimes we overcomplicate it in my field. If it's not firing, let's fire it up. If it's too tight and guarded, let's relax it and then probably strengthen it as well. So like we just have to balance the system. But effectively, the muscles just it's reflexively doing what it thinks it's supposed to do. But that doesn't necessarily. It's definitely not what you need in the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's where we get into where once you've healed, the tissue's healed, but some of the variables surrounding that healing process have not normalized.
Yeah.
And so when I see people 6-12 months after their injury, you've healed that original tissue, but now you have all of these secondary and tertiary reactions to that original injury that you didn't address because you've waited till now to start seeing somebody like me.
Right.
So we're more working on those reactions to the initial injury than the injury itself at that point.
Yeah, for sure. So that imbalance is really more of like compensation that happened from whatever the injury was.
99% of the time, that's what I think. And I think this applies to almost everybody that's on this table that we're sitting at right now. Like it's chronic people that I'm seeing where they thought an injury would go away. It keeps nagging, and then it just evolves. And before you know it, we have new tightnesses and weaknesses, and then that domino effect kind of perpetuates.
Yeah.
So we just have to kind of put a stop to that.
Yeah, cool. So just to give some more examples, we'll go through two of them. The hip flexor-glute relationship comes to mind in this context. So can you explain to the audience, like in just like they're 5, what are the tight hip flexors so often related to a glute problem, or because of, or it just is the glute problem?
Well, I kind of look at it as both abdominal and glutes kind of work together to stabilize that region. Like when you do a slight posterior tuck, and you tuck your butt under you, you're activating your rectus abdominis, which is your 6-pack abs, as well as your glute to kind of facilitate a little bit of that motion. And so to me, that's a very strong, stable position to be in. The hip flexor actually does the opposite of that motion. Are we on? Are we good? Should I keep talking? Okay. The hip flexor does the opposite of that motion. So when it fires, it pulls you into an anterior tilt. So I think a lot of the time the hip flexor is more in what we were referring to. Well, let's break it up into what we were talking about before. Is it tight or is it guarding? The hip flexor has attachments all throughout the front of that lumbar spine. So when you have low back pain, now that thing is going to try to protect. So now it's in spasm. Or it could have been, like we said, maybe that's the chicken. Well, if it's the egg, maybe it was tight, right? And we're sitting in certain postures all day, that muscle gets tight, then it starts to pull on the lumbar spine and create more force and tension. So I think inherently the hip flexor is weak by nature, because when's the last time you did a hip flexor focused exercise? You program that into your program lately? Nobody does. So most of us are just weak and tight in this muscle. So I think it is kind of drives a lot of people's back pain.
Yeah.
But again, it can be both protective and shortened in that kind of case scenario.
Yeah. And the same, I guess we could put this kind of method or theory into the same as for the upper body. So like neck and shoulder tightness.
Yeah.
That a lot of people deal with, especially, I mean, most people in corporate America are sitting at a desk, kind of hunched over a computer, have to be reminded of their posture. You're welcome again for the listeners. Like, I mean, we're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
So is that the same?
Well,
correct to say that?
It's such a domino effect there too, because the second you fall into that slouch posture or that kyphotic upper back posture, which means those rounded upper back, then your head falls forward. Then you have to still function, so you look up. So there's just this series of events. Well, now my pecs are tight, my shoulder retractors or my rhomboids and my traps are now overstretched. They're both inefficient movers now. Now my head's drifting forward, so these neck muscles called your SCM, which are these big muscles on the front lateral part of your neck, they're now always on. My traps and my are tighter. My neck flexors are weaker. Like, it's just this domino effect. And now we have to undo these things one at a time if you've been sitting in that posture for 5 years. Right. if it just happened and I just flared my neck in a minor fender bender and I can get you in good posture in the next 10 days, you're going to have a much easier next 6 months as if you didn't address that sooner than later. But it's always a domino effect. It's always this weakness causes this tightness, causes this weakness, causes this tightness. And we just have to, like I said, stop that snowball from happening.
Yeah, so let's switch gears a little bit with the same context, but in kind of like the youth athletes. So like, kids are playing sports and being more, I guess, what's the word? More dedicated to whatever sport that they maybe want to
They start to specialize.
Specialize, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. So we just had Gavin Carlin from soccer on.
Yeah.
So what do you see in young soccer players or just athletes in general when it comes to tightness and how that gets handled early on?
So I think that what I see the youth athletes, or what comes to mind when you're talking about that, is like during adolescence, especially with the boys, they often grow. They're going through growth spurts, and their bones are often growing much more quickly than like the tendons and the muscles. And so those tissues start to kind of pull on the growth plates in certain ways. So certain injuries start to occur, like two popular ones are Osgood-Schlatters of the knee, where the patellar tendon starts to pull on the tibia there, and the body lays down more bone. You actually will have like an increased bony prominence in front of the knee. It's a lot of knee pain for the individual. And then Sever's disease, which is at the calcaneus, which is the heel bone. The tight Achilles tendon starts pulling on that and create some separation at the growth plate and potentially damage how that bone grows from there on out. Anyway, a lot of that is just muscular tightness and the tightness defined by adaptive or shortening, but it's not necessarily that they've been in a poor posture. It's just that they're literally growing part of their body faster than the rest. So for those people, we really recommend, or those children, we really recommend we need to be aggressive with our stretching routine from the standpoint of frequent, but not from the standpoint of during the stretch itself. The aggressiveness is, I need you doing this all day long, or not all day long, but frequently every single day, and hold it for a sustained period of time, but be very gentle with that stretch at the same time. And it's hard to make a 12-year-old compliant because it's hard to make my 42-year-olds compliant that are paying money. So we just have to really get it into them that if they stretch and they stay consistent and just do your stretching while you're watching TV or playing your video game or talking on the phone anyway, then you're going to start to feel better and performance improves and all that kind of stuff. So that I think that's the main thing. The kids will be kids. Kids are going to have injuries. Kids are going to have poor movement patterns at times. They're developing still. They're still learning their bodies. But if your kid is going through some quick growth spurts, get them on a stretching regimen. Nothing crazy. Stretch the calves, stretch the hamstrings, stretch the quads, stretch the hips really well.
Awesome. So I feel like we can, kind of come to a close with this conversation. So I think it's a really good one. And just like all these topics, we really could nerd out and talk forever.
Oh, I definitely
use so much knowledge when we talk. So I guess just before we close it, is there anything specifically that you would like to add to this, like stretching and I'm still tight or whatever that kind of...
I mean, I guess I'm talking to the people that think stretching is the answer. It's part of the answer sometimes. It's never priority number one, or rarely priority number one. And even if it is priority number one, if I'm going to give you mostly mobility as the beginning of your program, which I do sometimes, it's very specific mobility. It's not just let me stretch my hamstrings. It's like, let's look at joint mobility before even hamstring flexibility, which is a whole nother thing, or, whatever muscle flexibility. But if you're stretching and you're not getting better, well, then obviously that's not the right answer.
Right.
So
yeah,
call us.
Yeah.
And we'll let you know what to do.
If you've been stretching, or just like I think beginning of this month we posted about how Aiden was just taking it on his own and doing YouTube stuff until he finally came in and was like, oh, like this is how I should do it. There's a method to the madness, for sure. So if you guys relate to that, if you clicked on this episode because you were like, oh, I'm still tight and I stretch all the time, what's the secret? Well, the secret is to call Movement Driven and come see Dr. Greg and have him help you out, because they don't just say strengthen, they don't just say lengthen, they say strengthen and lengthen. So I feel like those two right there just go right together.
Lengthen by strengthening.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So give us a call. You can visit us, moveitdriven.com. You can slide in our DMs. You can book a discovery call with Dr. Greg, or you can just come in for an eval and we'll get you fixed up. So thanks, Dr. Greg. This is a great episode. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you next time, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Want to see how we're helping people in Jacksonville bridge the gap between pain and performance? Head on over to movementdriven.com. Until next time, keep moving, stay driven.